Bang.
That's a take.
It's a take. Pete, you see this? Tulane football, baby.
We were discussing that.
She went there for 5 years, Pete. You know how many football games she went to?
You know, what the hell?
You know the problem, Pete? They've got a great stadium, Yulman Stadium. It's great. It's tight. It's brand new. But the students all sit out in the parking lot and party the whole time.
Why not
which I
go in
can't
and
hardly.
party?
Yeah. I mean, these guys beat some really good teams this year, and they're going to be in the Cotton Bowl on January 2nd against USC, for God's sake.
That could get ugly quick, man.
It could. Yeah, you're going up against the Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, and not happy that they didn't get into the playoff because of their own doing, but yeah, they might be out for a little bit of. They might be out for blood in that game.
Playoffs.
Yeah, they were sniffing at the playoffs, John, and then the sniffing went long gone because Utah ran away with it.
Yep. Well, folks, you are tuned in to the Rebels Edge. I'm John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. Our producer, Jared, is back in the studio. And boy, Pete, the market has given up, 700, now more than that, points, 800, 900 points almost, Pete, just like that. I mean, we're back down to negative for the Dow when the CPI came out, because this is the macro minute, folks. Yep. When the CPI came out, it was so much lower than the estimates on the street that everybody said, well, it's got a hockey stick to the upside. And it did. And people hit it and sold the crap out of it because they said there's a lot more inflation coming, Pete.
Yeah, it was ugly, John. I mean, it started out amazingly well, but that sell-off, and I'll tell you what, and we've said it time and time again, take a look at the dollar. I mean, we had the news, we had CPI, we had the numbers, we all understood that and where they were, where they lined up. But you take a look at some of the movements that we got out there, one of them being the dollar itself. And when the dollar started to, it started out, it was not doing much of anything. As it started to move to the upside, John got back up over 104. It's amazing how fast things turn. And it's been an unbelievable day already. And when you consider the fact that we're only at Tuesday and yet Monday was a wild day, then you add this one. I mean, we're going to finish the year like we started, I think, John, with high volume, some decent volatility, and some absolutely incredible moves intraday like we're seeing today.
Yep. Well, that's it for macro, folks. Again, you want macro, go somewhere else. You're only going to get 1 minute of macro here. Let's talk, Pete, about Moderna, because, of course, these guys made a ton of money from the vaccines for COVID. The vaccines that weren't really vaccines, Pete. They were sort of a treatment, but not really a vaccine in the traditional sense. But shares were up 23% today because basically they have a partnership with Merck, and phase 2 clinical trial for an experimental mRNA cancer vaccine is why that stock is jumping today.
Yeah, and it's that partnership with Merck, as you mentioned, John, because that's going in with Keytruda, which is a monster blockbuster drug for Merck, and it has been for a while. And the multi-use, that's the big thing that happens with a lot of these companies. If they can get multi-use out of some of these different cures, cancer, the vaccines and all the rest, it's unbelievable. I think this is it's a testament to Moderna that they are not just a company that's around for COVID, John. They're around for a whole heck of a lot more than that. That's exactly what their CEO was talking about as well. They are damned and determined to get this thing all the way through, get themselves into the market. And you can only imagine, because if the results look anything like they have in this phase 2 at the very end, and people start looking at that, this could be another one of these blockbuster drugs that we talk about all the time. And keep an eye on Merck. It doesn't get talked about enough, John. I know we're focused on Moderna here, but Merck has been moving higher and higher and higher. And we're getting there, what, 110 now, I think is where Merck's trading. So keep an eye on pharmaceuticals as well. It's not just a Moderna story.
Yep. And what Pete just described, folks, is a cocktail. They like to refer to these things as cocktails when you mix several treatments into one. It's not really a cocktail, but it is a mixture, and just something to make note of. This extends the usable life of many of these drugs. All right, Pete, let's talk about Fluence Energy. It's up 23% today. Basically, cloud-based software for renewables and storage. And despite the fact that these guys missed on earnings, Pete, the stock is up that much because basically, if they can indeed provide this cloud-based software for renewables, this one's really going to be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And when you look at those revenues, I mean, we're talking about record numbers for these guys. Absolutely incredible. They're knocking it out of the park. Now, they do have to prove to us that they're going to make money, John, because that has always been one of the criteria that you and I talk about. I think that's why the stock was down 55% year to date. People are waiting. They're hungry for this to happen. Their revenues continue to grow, but I think they are on their way. I think they're becoming very, very close to getting there, John, and turning that profit. And they've only been profitable in one of the last 4 quarters. But take a look at that volume today. And I think that speaks volumes about what people think right now. And they're just racing with their feet to buy this stock. And that's why we're seeing it jump the way it is. But 770,000 shares is what they average. They're over 3 million already today. So there is volume there. I think that supports it. They've just got to start making money. And I think that's not too far away.
Yep, I agree. So this would be one that we both give 2 thumbs up on, it sounds like, Pete.
Yep.
What about JetBlue? Now, JetBlue has been in the news for making that run at some airlines that they wanted to merge with and things like that. They were fighting it out between Spirit and Frontier and JetBlue. But they also, Pete, just announced that their capacity, flown capacity, will be on the low end going into the next quarter. In other words, you know, you have a range that you share with people, but if you're saying it's going to be on the low end, people are going to adjust what they think the price of the stock should be. And boy, it was down 5%. It was down 7%. Now it's down 9% at mid-session.
Well, John, and they're also talking about softer demand in December. That's not something everybody wants to hear. Usually that's supposed to be a big travel month, obviously with the holidays and everything else. And yet that number doesn't seem to be appearing to be something that's going to be very strong. That revenue per seat mile, that was on the low end. That's what you were just talking about. That's a bit of a problem. It's interesting too, John, and this is on a day where United actually started the day all right. They started pretty good because of that 100 Boeing Dreamliners that they ordered, and people get excited about something like that. But before you could blink, John, the stock started heading to the downside and absolutely cratered in front of the market cratering. This is a stock that was down 4, 5, 6% while the markets were still screaming to the upside. Now that they've actually turned and started to fall to the downside, we're seeing this stock start to really get hit to the downside. All of the airlines, last I looked, were in negative territory. They were all getting kind of smacked around. I don't know if it was just because of what we heard from JetBlue or if they're all starting to, you know, something about December. There's something going on out there, and they are selling some of these names pretty harsh today.
Yep, they sure are, Pete. And United, to give you a quick update on that, it hit 45.57. That's $45.50 a share. Right now it's at 41.27. So it's fallen by basically $4 plus off the high. It's at the lows of the day right now. That's UAL. All right, Pete, what about this one? Pinterest, 10% jump, slowdown in advertising spending, hit a lot of these social media stocks, but one of our favorite brokers to watch, Piper Sandler, thinks that Pinterest can rebound. We'll have to see. I'm not sure I'm a complete buyer into this one, Pete, but they moved their price target to 30 from 25. What do you think of Pinterest, PINS here?
Well, first of all, I commend the analyst from Piper, John, because you know what? We've talked about this with many of the other names over the years, and especially now with the Rebels Edges, we're defining a lot of different things that we get to pick what we talk about. But you know, John, it's amazing. What help is an analyst who tells you to sell after you've already gone down 90%? I don't think that's very helpful. This is a guy who's out there and just from Piper who says, you know what? Stock has come down. We've seen all the negatives that we have seen, and we actually are going to upgrade this stock because of the fact that they've got the new CEO who started in late June, who actually has some ideas on how to turn things around. Ads, yes, that is a factor, but he wants to change the entire platform going forward. And I think there are things that need to be done. By the way, when you look at the balance sheet of this company, John, absolutely phenomenal. Their free cash flow is phenomenal. What they've got cash to debt is outstanding. So from a fundamental standpoint, if they can start to get a little bit more on the revenue side and some of that profit margin starts to come, they really are a stock that I think can catapult to the upside. I think it's exactly what the analyst is seeing as well.
Yep, that is true. And I overall, Pete, I like it because of the optimism about ad spend. If that is correct, if the changes you're talking about are correct, then this one is a buy. But you got to prove it to me. You can't just talk about it. You got to show me.
Yeah.
All right. Let me give you one, Pete, for unusual activity. FXI. Now, you and I have been all over these names, everything from KWeb to FXI, whether it's the big caps or whether it's the internet stocks over in China. And when somebody buys 40,000 call options, you and I always take notice because that's 4 million share equivalent. So multiply a $29 stock by 4 million. That gives you an idea of how big this is. $100+ million potential investment. I like that. The stock was basically 29 bucks. They're buying the March 32s. So that's $3 above where the stock is. So call it about 11%, 12%, but it's way out in March. So this is one of those, Pete, where I'm going to buy it and put it away for a bit because I'm not worried about time decay because it's so far out in the future. And then hopefully when I look at it in a couple weeks or maybe even a month, I think this one's going to be a lot higher. What do you got for unusual, Pete?
Yeah, I like what you got there, John. And I'm going to trump you a little bit because you had 40,000 options. How about this? Sticking with the global ETFs, the EEM. So we're talking about emerging markets and we're talking about everything in the emerging markets now. Pretty interesting. 60,000 calls were bought, John. It just shows you the activity levels have really gotten crazy. They got 60,000 of the March 44 calls being bought. Now, the EEM was trading 39 bucks at the time. It's a little bit lower right now. 37 cents up to 38 cents for the options themselves. But here's something that sticks out as well, John. Last Friday, there was a buyer of 11,000 of the June 48 calls. I'm talking about June, going all the way out to June. And then Monday, 125,000 of the June 47 calls were bought. So we've got 11,000, we've got 125,000, and now today we've got this 60,000 of the March 44 calls. I think they are lining up for exactly what you and I are probably expecting as well, listening to Mike Wilson of Morgan Stanley. Hey, maybe the first quarter, maybe that's get a little bit jumbled and can be a little bit difficult. But after that, maybe we start to catapult to the upside. That's exactly what things look like from what you were talking about, the March options. I'm talking about March options and these other options in the EEM that were being bought. So I think that there's a lot going on there. By the way, the EEM, John, 40% of it is financials and technology together. Gives you a little bit of an idea of what you're getting. You also have 10% materials, so that's 50% of what you're getting when you are involved in the EEM, which is that global ETF.
Yeah, and just to give you guys a flavor, the EEM trades about 45 million shares a day.
Yeah.
So this is something that trades, sort of like Apple or some of the most popular stocks. So this is certainly where a lot of the big investors end up playing. All right, Pete, time for sports.
Yeah,
You have an eye towards some of the best general managers in the NFL. Maybe break that down a little bit for us.
All right. Well, I think there are plenty of them out there to choose from, but the number one guy for me, John, and I'm going to guess that you're going to completely agree with me on this one, but John Lynch of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, why would I say John Lynch? Here's why I'd say it. Trey Lance was their quarterback. They did everything in their power to get rid of Jimmy G. They thought they'd be able to get something, but they didn't want to just give him away either. So he stayed on the roster. Well, Trey Lance goes down. We bring in Jimmy G. Jimmy G does an outstanding job. He doesn't throw the interceptions that he's thrown in the past. He's having a great year, but he gets hurt. So he goes down, and who do they got? Well, Mr. Irrelevant, the last player picked in the draft, and we're talking about Brock Purdy. Well, Brock's done pretty well for himself. They absolutely destroyed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past weekend, John. He started the last couple of games and done very, very well. Now he's thrown an interception, but he has done a great job of what you've got to do as a 49er quarterback is you're not just a manager. You're moving the ball down the field, but how about the talent that you've got? And oh, by the way, they added to that talent earlier in the year, John, when they decided to say, you know what? We want Christian McCaffrey. That guy makes us complete because arguably the best defense in all of football is the San Francisco 49ers, built by John Lynch, the GM. Now he's got on the offensive side. They grabbed Christian McCaffrey when they needed something to spark that offense. He's been unbelievable. I think this guy has done an incredible job as a general manager. There are others out there. You might want to go to Philadelphia, though, John, because I think that guy's done a pretty decent job as well. But what do you think? Is it John Lynch or is it somebody else?
Or is it Bill Belichick?
Well,
because he's both the head coach and the GM for the Patriots. But no, it's not Belichick. I think you're right, Pete. Howie Roseman from the Philadelphia Eagles, he made a great trade to move into the draft position to get one of the most feared players in the NFL to really boost up that defense by picking up that kid from Georgia. And I think that kid is, just that. He's a kid, but he's already one of those people that draws a lot of double teams, Pete. And if you can do that, you can go pretty deep into the playoffs. So I like what he had to do to really beef up an already strong defense. If I had to pick a second, Pete, it would probably be this guy, Brandon Beane. Sort of sounds like the guy from the Oakland A's, right? Yeah, but Brandon Beane, he went out and picked up Von Miller, who was a game changer for those guys. They really miss him, but now it's going to be tougher without Vaughn going forward. That's why I said Howie Roseman from the Eagles, Pete.
Yeah, he did an unbelievable job, John. And how about even just a couple of years ago when they got Jalen Hurts? Nobody wanted him. I mean, here's a guy that basically got passed up all the way to the second round. I mean, it's really incredible. And they have built a team. You're right. I think that defense is one of the very best in the NFL, and they're absolutely incredible. So moving on to the next one. How about Dak Prescott, John? Everybody likes to talk about him. Oh, we got to have him. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. I like the Dallas Cowboys as a team. Love the owner. You and I have had the pleasure of getting to know Jerry Jones. He's a great investor, number one, and he's a great evaluator of talent, number two. But every once in a while, I start scratching my head, and here's why. I think Dak Prescott might be one of the most overrated players, not just quarterbacks, in the entire NFL. He's back. They've got talent everywhere, John. They've got a great tight end, I think. He does a heck of a job for him out of Stanford. He's solid. Two great running backs. Pollard's unbelievable. Zeke is one of the very best. Great receivers. You got CeeDee Lamb on the outside, all the rest of it, and a decent defense, right? A very good defense that gets after the quarterback. Well, here's some of Dak's numbers just to throw them out so that you know exactly where I'm coming from. He's got a QBR, John, of 52.5. Now, when you're up there towards the 90s and 100, that's the real quarterbacks. You get to the 50s, it does make you wonder a little bit, right? And here's why I say that: 14 touchdowns. He's got 9 interceptions this year. In the last 5 games, he's got 11 touchdowns. He's got 7 interceptions. He's not barely in the top 15 to 20 in just about every category. And yet it seems like the rest of these guys and analysts in there, ESPN and everywhere else, are like, well, but Dak is Dak. Well, I remember, John, when Dak was hurt, they seemed to do pretty well with the backup quarterback as well. Kind of reminds you a little bit of San Francisco. Who really is the best quarterback on the team? And is it really Dak? I don't even know about the answer to that, but everybody else will say it is. Is he overrated, do you think?
He very well might be, Pete. I pulled up on this statmuse.com. I pulled up his record with and without Dak. And with Dak, the Cowboys are 59-34. So obviously a winning record.
Yeah.
And, not that far from being a 2-1 winning record. But you look at some of the other variables in there, Pete, like, for instance, the number of points that you score on a weekly basis and so forth. He doesn't really stand out as that guy. He wins a fair amount, but the 4th down conversions and even 3rd down conversions versus, like you say, just a backup are not that outstanding. But there are those whatever, Pete, those variables that go into, do the players like him? Is he good in the locker room? And even though he's getting that really big check, it seems that the players do like him. They perform as best as they can for him. But I agree. I think there are some issues here that if they could have, or if they would have traded for somebody else rather than putting up that huge contract, if they would have gone out and got another quarterback, I think, these numbers could be even better down there in Dallas.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the last thing I'd say on the matter, I'm not ripping on Dak by any stretch, John. I'm just analyzing what I see in some of these numbers like you are, and throws too many interceptions. And here's the other thing. They've got the defense, right? I mean, when we talk about the Buffalo Bills and Dallas Cowboys, how about the Dallas Cowboys for sacks this year? Unbelievable. I mean, Micah Parsons is absolutely incredible. He's the closest thing to Lawrence Taylor you can find. And then you look across that defense and the number of sacks that they've got this year, they lead the NFL. I mean, they lead the NFL in a lot of different categories, either top 5 or in some cases maybe number 1 on the defensive side. And when you've got that on defense, it sure makes the offense a heck of a lot better. And I don't see them looking that much better. And that's what bothers me most. I don't know, John, as an NFC team, everybody seems to love Dallas. I think there are other NFC teams out there that are probably going to be more likely to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, and that is the goal. In the NFL, you got to get there and you got to win. Well, that's going to do it for us today, folks. Please join us again tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time for the Rebels Edge. Remember, you can always watch us live on Twitter. You can listen live on Spotify, at least for now. Spotify might be changing that live stream policy, Pete. We'll have to see. You can pick it up on YouTube. Also, marketrebellion.com/edge to watch and listen to the show. We'll see you tomorrow at 1, everybody.